Hey, welcome back to the Lead Up Podcast. I'm Mike Harbour, your host and publisher of the Lead Up Podcast. And here we teach all things leadership and personal growth, team development. You're listening to episode 422. In this episode, we're going to talk about one of the cornerstones of great leadership, adding value to your team. I wrote a book called Power Principles many years ago. I'd love for you to go to Amazon and grab a copy of that. Just look for my author page, but I'm going to be pulling some ideas from that book today. What I want you to understand is this isn't just about keeping your team engaged. It's really about unlocking their potential and helping them find a deeper sense of purpose in the work that they do. Why is this important? Because a team that knows their value, knows their purpose, knows their mission is unstoppable. Unfortunately, in my work and working with hundreds of companies and thousands of leaders over the years, we don't really do a good job of that. We're really good as leaders, me included, at kind of task mastering, right? Setting the goals and saying, hey, this is what we need you to do. But one of the things I've learned over the years, and we've helped other leaders learn and create, is purpose and value. So by the end of this episode, you're going to have some actionable strategies to add value to your team, to foster growth, to align their individual goals with your organizational mission, with your goals as a leader, those KPIs and things that you want to hit by the end of the month, the quarter, and the year. So as always, make sure you leave with these practical steps to apply these principles now in your leadership. Make sure you go ahead and grab a pen and paper. This episode is going to be packed with some great ideas and inspiration and action. Let's get going. I'm ready to help you lead up today. Let's talk about the first value step and why adding value matters. Here's the truth bomb for you. Everyone on your team, no matter their role, craves value. They want to know what they do matters and that their individual talents are recognized. In my book, Quit Losing Talent, and in the research we did behind that, and all the research that's out there right now, this is not just Mike Harbour speaking this, all the researchers will tell you this. The number one reason someone decides to stay with an organization, stay in a job, is do they feel valued for the work that they do? It's not money. Now, and I know, money is an indicator. It's a predictor, and it's often what people blame when they take a new job, because oftentimes when they do leave, they take a very similar role. But the number one thing that rises to the top in all the research is do they feel valued? John Maxwell said once, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So what does that mean for us as a leader? You can be the smartest person in the room. You can have the most experience on the team. But if your team doesn't feel that you value them as individuals, as human beings, as contributors to the overall goals of the organization and mission, then they're not going to feel valued, which means they're more likely to be disengaged in the work that they do. And so you're in this constant spin cycle of trying to improve engagement, try to get them motivated. And so one of the number one ways to create motivation for team members is what I'm teaching you today. So if you overlook the value your team brings to the table, you risk more than that disengagement. You risk losing great people altogether. Your top talent, your A players, as is often said. According to some other studies out there, 75% of employees cite lack of recognition as one of the primary reasons they leave a job. 75% of people that leave and change jobs say they didn't feel valued. They weren't recognized for the effort that they contributed. So here's something you can do. Here's an action item for you to show value, to create this value for your individual contributors on your team. Schedule regular one-on-ones. I want to challenge you. Go schedule a one-on-one with 3 team members this week and ask them this question. What part of your job excites you most? Where do you feel underutilized? Use their answers to help you as a leader to grow yourself, to guide them better and better support them, and to help engage them more in the work that they do for your team. That's a simple thing to do. Now, you may be having one-on-ones. The question I have for you is, are you engaging them with that question that I just gave you to ask? What excites you most about the work that you do? And where do you feel most underutilized? Try that. Just try that in 3 coaching sessions the next time you have those, like this week. Don't wait. Go do that now. And just look at the response. Now, some of them, let's be honest, some of them may look at you like you're crazy because you've never done that before. That's okay. It doesn't mean it's not going to work. Maybe you don't have that trust, that relationship, that bond with them yet. Implement that and then do it over and over and over throughout your coaching sessions for the next 30 days. The next 90 days. Have 3 coaching sessions with those employees over the next 90 days and see where the difference comes from by asking those questions. Here's the second value step in unlocking potential through strengths recognition. Okay? Unlocking potential through strengths recognition. What do we mean by that? Well, one of the biggest mistakes leaders make is treating people like interchangeable parts. Now, here's the thing. Your team's not a machine. Each person brings a unique skill set, a unique strength and talent, and also, by the way, perspective to the table in the way that they do things, the way that they see things. In my book, I mentioned earlier, Power Principles, principle number 9, I share a leader's primary role is to equip people to use their gifts. That's your primary role. Place them in their strength zone and get out of the way. Step out of the way. Now, how do you do that? Well, you might need to have some conversation with them. You might need to do some strengths mapping. I'll talk about that in just a minute. But when you align a person's strength with their responsibilities, magic happens. You'll notice sharper focus, more energy, better problem solving, more creativity, more initiative, and most importantly, a deeper sense of purpose with the team. So here's your action item out of this step to get people in their strength. Create a strengths map for your team using assessments like maybe a Gallup Strength Finder or a DISC assessment that we often use here at Harbour Resources or any similar tool out there. But create a strengths map of your team. This is leadership, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. When I talk about elite leadership, this is where we're trying to get you this year, is to continue to climb that ladder toward elite leadership. Understanding the strengths of your team and making sure you adjust their assignments, their roles, their responsibilities so that they can spend more time operating in their strength zone. Breaking out of this kind of one-size-fits-all mindset. This is the way that another way to show value to the individuals on your team. Create motivation, more efficiency and effectiveness from the work that they do. That requires time for you as a leader. You may be thinking, well, that's not leadership. I got a budget to manage. I got a schedule to manage. Manage it the right way. That's what elite leadership is not working hard, but working smarter. Get smarter about your people. Peter Drucker said this: the task of leadership is to create an alignment of strengths in ways that make weaknesses irrelevant. Look, none of us are going to be strong at everything. There's a lot of weak areas that I have in my life and the work that I do. Now, sometimes I have to do some things I'm not great at because it's the nature of leadership and business ownership that I have. But I always try to stay in my strength zone. Like doing what I'm doing, recording and teaching this podcast right now is a strength for me, I believe, and I try to do this. We do this every week. Now, once I record it, someone else takes it from there and does the editing and publishing and getting it out to you, our guests, so that you can listen. That's not in my strength zone, by the way. I hand that off to someone on my team to be able to do that for me. I try to stay in my strength zone. Value step 3, the power of purposeful collaboration. Here's something to think about. Does your team understand the why behind their work? Purpose has a way of turning tasks into mission. If you as a leader can articulate why the contributions that they operate in, why they matter, you'll see you'll see your team rise, their energy rise, and they'll rise to new levels of an engagement. Look, we've been talking about low employee engagement for 25 plus years with really little to no improvement, maybe little bounces up, but always going down. And it's because what we do, average leaders, they try some of these things I talk about. They do it once or twice, and then they go back into their old habits. How can you change habits? Ask me about that. Send me an email. Maybe we can talk about that. But it's really about changing your operating method, your habits, your behaviors as a leader to drive this engagement over the long term, to be able to sustain that. Again, that's a whole nother teaching and podcast for a later date. But what we're trying to do is continue to make improvements in employee engagement, and implementing some of these things I'm sharing with you today will help you do that. But you got to be consistent in it. Simon Sinek said, working hard for something we don't care about is called stress. Working hard for something we love is called passion. That's the difference that purpose brings to the table. So how can you create purposeful work for your team? That's where leadership comes in, by the way. That's what elite leaders do, is find purpose behind the work. Look, in my business with my team, I'm asking them to do all kinds of tasks. We got to do this, but here's why we're doing it. Connect the work that you're asking your employees, your team members to do, to the greater cause, the greater purpose, the why behind that. And you'll find that they'll give you more effort for that, with more enthusiasm and engagement in that. Helping your team unlock purpose means you've got to listen. Purpose isn't something that you impose on someone. It's something you uncover together. That's where that collaboration comes in. So what can you do? Here's an action item for you. Host a purpose workshop with your team. Ask them to articulate how they believe their work impacts the organization, how it impacts their team, how it impacts the world outside of the four walls of your business. Connect their individual purposes back to the larger mission of the company. What does that require? It requires elite leadership. For you to slow down and have a purpose workshop with your team requires you to do some planning, requires you to schedule that, requires you to prepare them for that, requires you to ask some thoughtful questions in that meeting. If you'd like some coaching around that, reach out to us here at Harbour Resources, and we'd be happy to engage with you in helping you get to that place of a purpose workshop. I've seen leaders who go that extra mile by sharing success stories in the work done or customer testimonials. It reminds everyone why their work matters and ignites this sense of renewed commitment. And so for you as a leader, I would challenge you to find ways, find stories, find examples, find testimonials that you can share back to your team about how the work that they do matters and why it matters, to keep them engaged in that. Let's look at value step number 4, the ripple effect of value in your culture. Picture this. When you lead by adding value, it becomes a domino effect. You've played that game before, I'm sure, or at least seen it, where someone sets up all these dominoes and they hit the first one, and then eventually, you can do miles and miles of those things, and that domino effect, they all begin to fall. Not only does your team thrive when we start creating this value in our culture, but they begin to spread the same culture of recognition and empowerment. Because you've built this energy, you've built this attitude, you've built this engagement, this value within them, and they begin to spread that out. They become what I call culture spreaders for you. So your job eventually gets easier as a leader. They won't allow anybody new onto the team to blow that culture up. They'll be culture carriers. When the new employees and team members join your team, they become protectors of that culture for you. Now, there's a lot of work for you to do on the front end if you haven't created this. And that doesn't happen overnight. It takes months and months. I often work with CEOs and I tell them, look, it's going to take you a minimum of 12 months to start changing minds. And it may take you another 6 to 12 months to change behaviors. So when you're thinking about culture change, you got to be committed to that. 12 months minimum to begin to change minds. And in another 6 to 18 months to change behaviors that stick, that sustain over time. So culture change and culture creation is a long-term mission that you've got to have as a leader. In my book, Power Principles, principle number 2, I said this: leadership is caring more about the cause and the people in your company than about your own personal pain and success. It's painful to have to repeat the values, to repeat the culture. It's painful to have to say things over and over again. I get that. I'm as impatient as anybody listening to this podcast. I want to say it once and I want it to happen now. But what I've learned through my 30 years of leadership experience and leadership coaching and training with organizations is I got to go through that pain of repetition. I've got to go through that pain of process. I've got to go through that pain of dealing with people sometimes hard people, sometimes letting people go or redirecting or recoaching. And what we're talking about is behavior change, right? Just ask yourself, how difficult is it for you to change your own behavior? I'm challenging you to change some of your own behavior as an elite leader today. How difficult is that going to be? You've got to be willing to go through that pain, that personal pain, and set aside that personal pain, set aside your own agenda, your own success, so that you care more about the cause and the people. Caring isn't just about being nice. It's about recognizing that when people feel valued, they're more willing to go above and beyond, not for you, but for the mission as a whole. That's where real leadership comes in. They're doing it for the mission, for the team, not for you. I know I spent 6 years active duty and another 6 years in the reserves in the U.S. Army. And it was often said that, when someone goes to war, when the military goes to war, they're not necessarily going to war for you. They're going to war for their buddy, their teammate, this bigger cause. Like, they're not necessarily going to war for me, the leader that's challenging them to go out and do that, right? It's for this bigger cause. It's for their teammate right beside them that's after that same mission and cause. And so we need to understand that as a leader, it's not about you. It's about the cause, purpose, about the bigger mission. Here's another example. A former colleague of mine made it a habit to write a personal handwritten thank you note every Friday to at least one team member. And it was just a simple, heartfelt, specific message, by the way. And over time, this small gesture began to transform a stressed out team, an overwhelmed team, into one that was proactive and collaborative. Could you do that? It's a small, maybe painful thing for you to sit down and do that. You may be saying, well, I don't have any cards. Go to the store, buy 100 of them. You can buy 100 white cards. They don't have to have anything special. You make it special by putting some handwriting in it and thanking those individuals on your team for the work that they do. So here's an action item for you. Other than that card thing, start an initiative called the Gratitude Friday Challenge. Each Friday, you and your team write notes of appreciation to each other. So include your team, like challenge them to do the same thing. It builds everybody up. Again, we're trying to create this culture where everybody's carrying that same effect. And it may sound small, but over time, the ripple effect in that in your culture will be huge. John Wooden used to say, he said, you can't live a perfect day without doing something for someone who will never be able to repay. I just love that. I don't know if you know who John Wooden is. He's deceased now, but he was a basketball coach at UCLA, won 13 national titles. I think 7 in a row or 9 in a row. I can't remember. It was a lot. He coached guys like James Worthy and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar way back in the 70s. Fantastic leader of men. And so anytime you can learn from him, you might pick up a book. He's got something called the Wooden's Pyramid. It's insightful. It's impactful. It may change your leadership. But I just love that quote. It's about humility, right? I need to do something for somebody they can't repay. That's the essence of leadership. We shouldn't expect, like in your role of leadership, you shouldn't expect people to follow you because you're the leader. You should expect them to follow the plan, the mission, the purpose, because it's more important than anything else that we do. So let's look at the fifth and final step I want to leave you with today, bridging the gap with leaders in training. So if you've made it this far, I want to leave you with this critical thing. Creating value within your team doesn't end with you. Great leaders don't just lead, they build future leaders. But one of the most important things you can do, and I teach this all the time, the true test of leadership, I heard this from John Maxwell once. The true test of leadership is a leader that can produce a leader that can produce another leader. That means developing and mentoring and equipping and coaching and training and testing. So great leaders don't just lead, they build future leaders. They mentor, they coach, they delegate, they equip, they empower others to step into leadership roles themselves. In principle number 11 out of my book, Power Principles, I said this: what got me here won't take me where I want to go. So your focus shouldn't just be on delivering today. It should be also about fostering a bench of leaders who can carry the torch for tomorrow when you're gone, when you retire, when you take another job. So here's your action item I want to challenge you to do. Select one team member to mentor this year or this quarter. Share not just the how-to of leadership, but also the inner mindset that makes elite leaders thrive. Plant those seeds early. Challenge them to listen to the Lead Up podcast or any other leadership podcast out there with you. And if you need a little inspiration, here's an old African proverb. It said, the best way to climb a mountain is with someone else's hand in yours. I know I like to hike. I like to go climb, some hills. I like to challenge myself. Sometimes I do that alone, but if I know it's going to be a tough hike, I like for someone to go with me because it's encouraging when we're together. So I want to challenge you as we continue in our Elite Leadership series in 2025. Pick at least one person that you're going to reproduce yourself in this year, and then challenge them to go reproduce themselves in someone else next year. That's where real elite leadership comes from, is being able to reproduce yourself in a leader that can reproduce themselves in another person. So let me wrap things up. Remember this: adding value to your team isn't about hand gestures. It's about consistency. It's about intentionality. It's about trust. Just a recap of the 5 things that I shared with you today. The action item: conduct those one-on-one meetings regularly. Find out where your team feels they're being underutilized the most. Create a strengths map. Align them with their strengths and the roles as much as you can. We can't always get them exactly where we want them or where they would like to be, but we can find projects for them to lead, find tasks for them to do that's more in alignment with their strengths. Host a purpose workshop. Help them connect what they do to purpose and mission. Kick off that Gratitude Day challenge by starting this handwritten note culture of appreciation in your team. And then lastly, mentor someone else. Develop a leader in training program within your department. You may be saying, well, the rest of my organization is not doing that. You be first. Leaders go first. You be the one to start that. Your team's potential is a key waiting to unlock. It's like a key waiting to unlock success. As a leader, you hold the ability to turn that key. Hey, if you enjoyed this episode of the Lead Up podcast, leave us a review on your favorite listening platform. But more importantly than that, share it with others. You have colleagues that I know need to hear what I just shared today. Do it together. Listen back to it together and say, hey, how can we encourage each other? How can we hold each other accountable to really implementing these things that Mike shared with us today. Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Lead Up Podcast. I hope you continue to listen. Make this the year of elite leadership. We'll see you on the next episode of the Lead Up Podcast.